Well, hi, my name's Joanna Frageorgia. I am a public affairs specialist for AAA Northeast, and I am joined by the incredible John Paul, who is AAA Northeast car doctor. And I will say, having worked with John for almost 5 years, he has heard quite a number of my car questions and car conundrums and car problems. So today we're doing this video to discuss kind of those basic car maintenance things that might seem easy to some, but might be a little bit difficult for others. So welcome, John. Thanks for joining me.
Well, thanks for having me.
So I guess I'm going to kind of start off with one of the basics that I always get confused by, but talking about the fluids, all of those things that go into our vehicles. So is there just anything that I should know about the fluids that go into my vehicle? Are there ones I should be checking maybe more regularly than others? And then are there ones I can just kind of fill myself, or do I need to go to my mechanic to get that done?
Depending on your car, there is up to 10 vital fluids. Now, some are a little bit more vital than others. Some of the important ones are engine oil, which you can very easily check. Most cars, not every car, but most cars have an engine oil dipstick. And if you look in the owner's manual, it's pretty simple to check engine oil. For the average car, you warm the car up, you get it come up to temperature. You shut the car off, let it sit for about a minute, get a clean cloth, find the engine oil dipstick, remove the dipstick, wipe off the oil, put the dipstick back in, pull the dipstick back out, and there's marks on it. Sometimes there's just hash marks. Sometimes it'll say full and safe, and then a mark below that. You want it up to whatever the top mark is. That's the full mark or the safe mark. Running an engine without oil is going to end up ruining the engine, or at minimum, it's going to cause some damage, some accelerated wear. So a car that's in relatively good condition, and most cars today take somewhere in the neighborhood of 5 quarts of oil. So you could be driving along not knowing anything. You could be down a couple of quarts of oil. You're not going to get any kind of warning on the car, and you could be causing accelerated wear, and your car that might only have 50 or 60,000 miles on it, driving around like that could be the equivalent of having a car with 200,000 miles on it. So accelerated wear. The other pretty important one is the engine coolant, sometimes referred to as engine antifreeze. Antifreeze plays a couple of key roles. It prevents the engine from freezing in the wintertime. It's the thing that it helps keep the engine cool. It also helps prevent against overheating in hot weather. And it also lubricates some of the internal parts of the cooling system, primarily the water pump. And what happens is engine coolant turns acidic over time. And that acid actually can eat away the inside of the engine. And it can cause some pretty severe damage. So you want to follow the owner's manual. In every case, you want to follow the owner's manual in what needs to be done with the car. But in most cases, engine coolant has really come a long way in the past 25 years, but still every 5 or so years, it probably needs to be changed, sometimes as early as 3. There are a few models on the market, not many, that consider the engine coolant the first time around to be good for the life of the engine. Very few cars are that way, though. But for the most part, it should be checked regularly. So sort of in the spring and the fall, they'll check it for both the coolant level to make sure it's full, but also check it to see whether it's going to protect the engine against freezing in the wintertime. And also some shops will also check for whether the coolant is actually acidic and starting to turn into an acid. And the repair is pretty straightforward. It's just drain it, flush it out, refill it, put fresh coolant back in, and you're good to go again. Those are 2 of the kind of most critical. And then some of the others are brake fluid, which can become contaminated. Transmission fluid can be an issue, power steering fluid, and it really depends on the car. Some of these fluids are easier to check than others. And then, of course, is my favorite and the simplest fluid, the windshield washer fluid. It's a safety feature to be able to keep the windshield clean. It's pretty easy to add to. You get a gallon of windshield washer. You find the thing that looks like a picture of a windshield wiper and you add the fluid. But I have talked to many people that have mistakenly added windshield washer fluid to where the engine coolant goes. And you won't really cause any harm. The windshield washer is basically alcohol, soap, and water, so it's not really going to cause any harm. Most people kind of catch themselves partway through the first pouring and don't cause a whole lot of problems, but still look for the one that says windshield washer. It's going to have a little picture of windshield washer, and windshield washer fluid is inexpensive, usually $3 or $4, and there's nothing worse than running out of windshield washer fluid while you're driving down the road and your window is getting covered with salt and sand and mud and dirt and all that kind of stuff, and then you have a big smear on the windshield and you can't see where you're going.
I actually just put windshield wiper fluid in my vehicle the other day, so hopefully made you proud. So maybe transitioning from fluids, let's talk about tires. How often should I check my tire pressure? And maybe the tread depth as well, because I know that's important for safety.
Tire pressure should be checked once a month or so. It should be checked before the tires get driven any real distance. So you don't want to, if you just came off the highway, that's not the time you want to check the tire pressure. You want to check them first thing in the morning before you really go anywhere. If you don't know how much air to put in the tires, open up the driver's door. There's usually a placard on most cars that tell you how much air to put in the tires. In every car, it's less than the maximum amount on the tire. If you look at the sidewall of the tire, there'll usually be a marking. They'll say, this is the maximum air pressure. That's not what you want to put in. You want to put in what it says on the sidewall or on the door placard. So the maximum tire pressure in my car, for instance, is 35 pounds, but it requires 32 in the front and 31 in the back. Again, check it once a month or so. Go get an inexpensive tire pressure gauge. Don't trust the tire pressure monitor system. Many cars built since 2007 have a built-in tire pressure monitor that will tell you how much air is in the tires. Some will only tell you if there's a tire that's very low. Others will tell you there's a low tire, it'll tell you which one, but it won't tell you how much air is actually in the tires. Also, when the tire pressure gets, when the tires get cold, a lot of these systems don't work when the temperature is under 30 degrees or so. So get a tire pressure gauge. They're inexpensive, $5 or $6, and check the tire pressure once a month or so and adjust it as necessary. As far as tire tread, a tire is considered worn out in just about every state when it gets down to 2 30-seconds of tread. If you don't have a way to be able to measure 2 30-seconds, that's the distance between the edge of a penny and the top of Lincoln's head. That's 2 30-seconds. That's a tire that's worn out. At AAA, we like to tell people it's a better idea to replace the tires when they get down to 4 30-seconds of tread. And that's the distance between the edge of a quarter and the top of Washington's head. And what you want to do is you want to take that quarter and stick it in the tread. So turn it upside down, stick it in the tread, kind of go across the tread in 3 or 4 places. And if the tread doesn't come up to at least Washington's head, it's time to replace it, time to replace the tires. And typically you replace them in pairs. In some cars, you replace them in 4s. Tire tread is really important in wet weather driving conditions. These aren't exact numbers, but a tire that's in relatively new condition, so one that's maybe not brand new, has a little bit of wear on it. If you had to step on the brakes at 60 miles an hour on a rainy day, that tire might stop in 160 feet. That tire with 4 or 5 30-seconds might stop at 190 feet. That tire that is still perfectly legal at 3 30-seconds might take 240 feet to stop. So that's the difference between, 2 tractor trailers almost. So that's the difference, if you had a jam on the brakes at 60 miles an hour up the highway, that's the difference between a crash and one that didn't happen. So it is real important to get out there and check your tire pressure regularly, check your tire tread regularly. If your car has 25 or 30,000 miles on it, it's time to start checking the tire tread and see what kind of shape the tires are in. Also, at the same time, it's a good idea to go around and kind of run your hand around the edge of the tires and look for any cuts and bubbles and bruises and things that just don't look normal. You could hit a pothole, cause a little bit of a bubble in the sidewall of the tire. Tire could perform pretty well. You might not notice anything, maybe a vibration or something, but maybe you wouldn't notice anything. But that's a tire that's getting ready to fail, and they fail in pretty catastrophic ways. So that's a typical blowout waiting to happen. So check your tires on a regular basis. If you hit a pothole, and we have a lot of them, after you hit a pothole, good idea to get out and check the tires, make sure they're okay.
Yeah, that's such a great tip, John. I think, I need to go and do that with my car and check those tires and make sure they're ready for any weather that's going to be thrown at us. With tires as well, I'm wondering, I can't count the amount of times that my tires have gone flat or I've needed to change a tire due to something like that tire failure. And so I'm just, I typically call a friend or call AAA, but how hard is it to actually change my tire? Are there any problems that if I tried to do it solo that I might encounter?
Yes. Everybody should know how to change a tire. Most cars are similar, but they're all a little bit different. Some cars, in fact, don't even have spare tires. So if you have one of those cars, and you get a blowout somewhere out in the middle of nowhere, you're sort of in trouble. First off, look in your trunk, make sure you have a spare. Also, make sure all of the appropriate tools are there. So the lug wrench, the jack, if there's any kind of special tool to remove a hubcap or a cover. We have a Volkswagen in our family. It has this pretty cover that covers the front of the lug nuts, but you need this little special wire tool to remove it. You want to make sure you have that tool. Also, if your car has locking lug nuts, special lug nuts are designed to prevent theft of your wheels and tires, you want to make sure you have that key. Sometimes people hide it in some place where nobody will be able to find it. Unfortunately, it's usually nobody can find it when they need it. So you want to make sure it's kind of packed in with the lug wrench or something. The steps to go through, and you can find steps in your owner's manual or on YouTube or wherever. But basically what you want to do is you want to get your jack positioned properly, and each jack has a certain place to fit underneath the car. You want to start the jack. You want to start to jack the car up, but not enough where you actually take the wheel off the ground. And then you want to get out your lug wrench, and you want to be able to try to get enough leverage on the lug wrench to loosen the lugs while the tire is on the ground. Something you can kind of do if you need to. And it's a little hard to explain, but before you jack up the car, take your jack, and you'll see a lot of people stand on the edge of the lug wrench and try to jump up and down on it to loosen the lugs. What happens is, because the lug wrench sits 4 or 5 inches away from the edge of the tire, when you do that, it kind of just falls off the end of the wheel stud. If you position the jack kind of under the corner of the lug wrench, so you lift up the jack a little bit, put it under the corner of the lug wrench. Now, when you go to stand on it, your weight is on the end of the lug wrench, and not trying to force it off the end of the lug. I know it's a little hard to explain, but it's sort of like someone holding the corner of the lug wrench for you while you're trying to loosen it. That sometimes is pretty helpful for people. The other thing you can do is either you can get a bigger lug wrench to keep in your car, sort of a 4-way lug wrench, so you can put more effort into it, or even a piece of pipe or something that fits on the end of the lug wrench to give you more leverage. That can help too. In our family cars, we keep a portable air compressor in each car. So something you can hook up either to the cigarette lighter or under the hood to the battery. And that way, if you come out and you have a flat tire, maybe you can just pump it up, and then you can drive home and take care of it where it's a little bit safer to do, or you can bring it to a garage or a gas station or a tire store and get the tire repaired properly. So most tires today don't catastrophically go flat. They go flat a little bit at a time, and then all of a sudden you notice it and you go, oh, I have a flat tire. That's the ideal place where you can air up with a little air compressor. And they're relatively inexpensive, $30 or so. I have a little air compressor in each car, and I also have a little jump start box in each car, so I can jumpstart my cars if they have dead batteries. So, but that's something you can do. But make sure you have a jack and a lug wrench and a spare tire. And also, when you're checking the air in your tires, every once in a while, check the air in your spare too, because sometimes that's the tire that is the one that people forget about. And all of a sudden, you have a flat tire and your spare's flat. Now you have 2 flat tires. Then you're definitely calling for AAA to get your car towed. So.
Yeah, I remember there was a season when I had so many times where one tire would just go flat, and so that portable air compressor was huge for me.
Yeah.
Until I was able to get that tire completely fixed.
Right. And a lot of times what happens is, as cars get older, they build up rust around the edge of the rim where the tire actually seals to the rim. So you have this sort of nonstop slow leak. It's not like a nail in the tire that might go flat pretty quickly. It's just a little bit of air all the time that you're losing. And pretty typically, even a perfect tire on a perfect wheel will lose about a pound of air every month or so. And when the temperature drops, for every 10-degree drop in temperature, you lose about a pound of air. So it's not unusual to have to add air to your tires. And that's why it's important to check them regularly.
Yeah, thank you for those tips. Now back on to I know we talked about windshield wiper fluid, but what about those windshield wipers? I think this is one where I've had in my mind, I feel like I could change it myself, but is that realistic?
Yeah.
How difficult is that?
Most windshield wiper blades are held on with just a little clip. You don't really need much for tools. You might need a little screwdriver, but not much more than that. And they usually just hook on to the windshield wiper arm, the part that the blade actually connects to. Pretty easy to change for most cars. Some are a little bit more difficult than others. Some of the very expensive imported cars, the wipers can get a little bit tricky to replace. But for the most part, if you drive a Toyota, a Nissan, a Volkswagen, a Chevy, a Ford, they're usually pretty easy to change. I always recommend buying quality replacement blades. You don't necessarily have to go to the dealer, but if you see windshield wiper blades that are $3 or $4 and windshield wiper blades that are $50, you don't need to buy the $50 ones, but stay away from the $30 or the $3 ones, because they tend to be a harder rubber. They tend to chatter and squeak and make a lot of noise. So kind of somewhere in the middle there. And some auto parts stores, some of these big chain auto parts stores, will, if you buy the wipers, they'll replace them for you.
Wow, that's a helpful tip. Now, let me put you through a scenario that actually one of my friends went through recently.
Okay.
So her car was not starting, and she actually called a friend of ours who had jumper cables, who thankfully was able to come to her rescue with those, but neither of my friends actually knew how to use them. Could you maybe walk me through how to use
Sure.
Jumper cables, and maybe when is the point, if those aren't working, that you might need to call a battery technician?
Yeah. Well, let's first start off with, if you need to jumpstart your car and you're able to do it, you've really only fixed the symptom, which was the car didn't start. You haven't really fixed the problem. Now, unless the problem was you left the door open or the headlights on or something like that. But if you closed your door and locked your door at night and you came out in the morning and the battery was dead, and you're like, oh, call my next door neighbor and we'll jumpstart the car, and the car started, you fixed what was wrong, which was the car didn't start, but you really didn't fix the heart of the problem, which was maybe the battery's bad or there's something else wrong with the car. So keep in mind, a jump start's kind of a warning of maybe there's something else you need to look at. So pretty simple. If you are using conventional jumper cables, don't be misled by the colors. A lot of people are like, oh, you look at the red cable and the black cable and you hook them all together. You want to look more at specific markings on the battery. Every battery has a plus sign and a minus sign. The plus side is the positive cable. Typically it's red, and the negative cable is typically black, but not always. And that's where it gets a little bit tricky. So you want to make sure that you hook the cables up appropriately. And starting with the donor car, the car that your friend showed up with in the jumper cable. And I like to do everything with the car in the off position. So shut the car off. Position the cars close to each other, just for ease of connecting things together. Back in the olden days, they used to say, don't let the cars touch each other, because cars had metal bumpers and the metal bumper acted almost like a connection. So I still like to say, don't let the cars touch each other, but there's no real reason for it. Just ease of getting back and forth. So, so position the cars close together. Have both cars off. Positive cable of the negative of the loaner car. So plus cable connects to the plus cable of the dead car. Negative cable of the donor car connects to not the negative terminal on the battery, but some good solid piece of metal under the hood. So look for a metal bracket or something that is under the hood that you connect to. Some cars actually have jump start terminals. They'll have a place where you can actually connect the cable to. And a good way to remember this is plus to plus, minus to metal. So if you think of starting with the donor car, plus to plus, minus to metal, and you'll be fine. Then try to start the dead car. If it doesn't start up the donor car, let it run for a few minutes, maybe even race up the engine just a little bit, and then try to start the other car. If it doesn't start, then what you want to do is you want to check all your connections. Make sure you have a good kind of connection on the batteries, because some batteries are a little hard to connect to. So make sure you have a good connection. Kind of do the same procedure again, race up the engine a little bit, try it. If you're starting to get a little bit of noise, little new noise, so now the engine's cranking over a little bit, let it rest a little bit, and then try it again, because it's starting to charge that other battery back up. If it does start to crank over, but it doesn't start, crank it over for 10 seconds, maybe let it rest, crank it over for 10 seconds. If it doesn't start, it's time to call for a tow truck. There's something else wrong with it. If it does start to crank over a little bit more, well, that's good. That's, you'll be able to get it going. But the safety part of it is plus to plus, minus to metal. Also a good idea to wear safety glasses, some sort of, and most glasses that are made in New England are safety lenses, so that's a good idea. But if you don't have safety glasses, if you don't have glasses, wear safety glasses of some sort. You can buy them, they're pretty inexpensive, because you can sometimes, in worst case scenarios, bad things can happen with batteries. They can actually literally blow up. So, and that comes from sparks. When a battery discharges, it makes hydrogen gas. Hydrogen gas is very flammable. And that's the reason why you don't want to connect from the negative terminal of the good battery to the negative terminal of the dead battery, because sometimes there's a spark. And if that spark happens right on top of the battery and there's hydrogen gas, it could blow up. So that's why you want to attach the battery cable to a piece of metal, because even if it does spark, it's not right on top of the battery at that point.
Wow, that's a very helpful tip.
So plus to plus, minus to metal, turn it into a little song, and you'll be good to go.
Okay, well, we'll all remember the song.
All right.
Okay, so I think another question, and this has happened to me, unfortunately, but the situation is my car smells. What could that indicate? And then is there anything I can do about it?
Well, it depends what it smells like. It could be, now if it's just the outside of the car, you walk by the tailpipe and it smells bad with the car running. It could be that there's some internal issue with the engine. Could be it's running too rich, using too much fuel. Could even be a contamination of fuel problem, or it could be even something like a cylinder head gasket, which will also make kind of a white smoke and also have a weird smell to it. If it's a bad smell inside the car, or an odd smell inside the car, if it's a sweet smell inside the car, like kind of maple syrupy smell, that's an indication that probably the heater is going bad. There's a part called the heater core, which is kind of a little radiator that makes the heat inside the car. And if you smell that sort of heat smell, that antifreeze, syrupy, sweet smell, that's an indication the heater is going bad. If it smells just bad, old sneaker sort of bad, that could be an indication there's mold and mildew building up inside the heater system. And you can try to clean that. You can go get some disinfectant spray, and you can spray all the ductwork and spray down inside of it, and then turn the fan on. It will sort of splash it around inside the car, and it might clean it. And if it's a really bad smell, it may be some sort of rodent got inside your car and died. And we've seen that quite a bit in the past few years, because as there's more construction going on, there's less places for these critters to go, and they look for something warm, and they can crawl inside your car. And unfortunately, sometimes they can die inside your car. So that's some of the really bad smells that sometimes you get.
Eek. Some of those aren't so fun, but thank you for those tips of what to do.
Yeah. The other thing is, if you do have a mold and mildew smell, sometimes what happens is the air conditioner is not draining properly. And when you shut off your car, and almost every car does this, you shut it off on a hot day, and you might come back and you'll see like a puddle of water underneath the car. And it's just clear water. It's the condensation that builds up from the air conditioner taking the moisture out of the air. And if the drain isn't functioning properly, all that water ends up building up inside the car, and that water turns into sort of sludgy, moldy, mildewy water. And you want to make sure at that part that it's draining the way it should.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's an important tip as well, of something to check or to get that checked out. Now, with warning lights, some are green, some are yellow, some are red. How important are those to pay attention to?
Think of traffic lights. Red light's really important. It means you need to stop. Same thing with your car. If you have a red warning light that comes on, a red battery light, a red brake light, a red oil light, stop immediately. Pull over to the side of the road right away. Stop immediately. If it's a yellow light, like a check engine light that came on, or maybe a low coolant light that says the coolant's low, but it's not overheating. Maybe it's a low fuel light. That's the most typical yellow light that people see, the one that says it's time for gas. You need to get to it. Check engine lights are yellow. They don't mean pull over right away. They mean get the car serviced on a fair, a reasonable time frame. And then the green lights, obviously turn signals and some other lights that come on. When you start up your car, you'll see all of the lights come on for a second. And most of them will flash. They'll do different things. And you can actually see what you have when you turn the key on. The brake light will come on. The airbag light will come on. The traction control light will come on. The anti-lock brake light will come on. The airbag light will come on. All of these lights will come on, and they should shut off after the car runs. But that's a good way to kind of take an inventory of what kind of lights your cars have. But the important part is red, stop immediately. Yellow, make a note of it, get it in for repair. And green or blue, don't worry too much about it.
And I think even, checking in, if you have any questions about the lights as well, like looking in the manual that we talked about before because I found myself.
The owner's manual is the least read book ever published. Most people don't look at it. And I haven't been to a junkyard or salvage yard in a long time, but the best looking part of any car in a junkyard is usually the owner's manual, because nobody looks at them.
There you have it. Now, I know with car repairs, so there are some situations, say that you get a red light, or you get a yellow, and you need to take it in. Are there some things that can be DIY'd, kind of do it yourself?
If your car has a oil light that comes on, an engine light that comes on, and you pull over right away, and you check the oil, and there's no oil in the car, well, you can add oil, and chances are the light will probably go out. Same thing if the car started to overheat and the temperature light came on. Pull over, shut the car off, allow it to cool off normally. Don't do anything, just let it sit there and cool off. And then top off the radiator, so add the coolant to it. Now, you haven't fixed the problem. The problem is something caused it to overheat, or there's a leak in the system, but it might be enough to be able to get you a reasonable distance. All of the fluids in the car, as long as you keep them full, you can go a long time. So if your car burns a quart of oil once a week, you check the oil once a week and add a quart of oil, you can drive that car for a long time. Same thing if your engine is using a lot of coolant. You look and your engine coolant's low. Well, keeping it topped off, you can drive the car for a long time. The one thing that I will typically say to most people that you don't want to take any chances with is if the brake light comes on and you look and you're like, oh, I'm out of brake fluid, I'll just add more brake fluid. I wouldn't do that because it's inconvenient when your car doesn't start. It's deadly when your car doesn't stop. So you don't want to take a chance with faulty brakes in your car. If the red brake light comes on, stop the car, have it towed to a garage and have them check it over.
Yeah, brake failure is not a fun issue. Definitely a huge safety risk.
Yeah.
So kind of to finish off, John, this one, I know there's been a lot of buzz about catalytic converters being stolen from vehicles.
Right.
Yeah, no. So when it comes to protecting my vehicle from theft, especially of those parts, is there anything I can do?
There isn't a lot you can do if it's a determined thief, but the best thing you can do, just like keeping your car from getting stolen, lock your car, park in a well-lit area, park as close to your home as possible. So if you live in an apartment and you have to park in a parking lot, try to park under someplace where there's a lot of visibility and maybe parking lot lights. If it's at your own home, maybe tuck your car up closer to the house than you normally would. If you have a long driveway and you park at the end of the driveway, maybe this isn't the time you want to do it. The biggest issue with catalytic converter theft, it can happen to any kind of car. Typically, it happens to SUVs more than anything else because they sit up a little bit higher. Catalytic converter thefts have become popular for a couple of reasons. First off, cordless tools make it easier to steal a catalytic converter because they literally cut it off. So they cut off pretty easily with the cordless Sawzall. The second issue is catalytic converters are filled with very valuable metals inside of them, things like palladium and platinum and all kinds of different things. And unfortunately, unscrupulous scrap dealers will take catalytic converters without any question sometimes, and they'll just take one, and it could be one that is literally brand new, stolen from a car dealership, and they'll take it. And they shouldn't be doing it. I mean, that's just what it comes down to. But park in well-lit areas. There are some brackets that you can have installed. There are some plates that you can have installed that will prevent catalytic converter theft. Usually they're either fairly bright colored with the idea that if a thief goes to look under their car, they'll say, oh, somebody's tried to make this hard to steal. I'll move on to the next car. The most popular catalytic converter theft vehicle is the Toyota Prius because that converter has the highest value. I've heard in some cases $300 or $400 worth of value as salvage. So, thieves will pull up in the middle of the night, they'll go over, they'll sort of jack the car up and they'll quietly try to cut the catalytic converter out and off they go. When you get out in the morning, you go to start your car and all of a sudden you wonder, where did this high performance car come from because it sounds real loud. Well, it sounds real loud because the catalytic converter is missing and it's not being connected to the muffler anymore. So park in a well-lit area, park where there's people, if that's the case that people are going to be kind of coming and going or somebody might notice it, that's about the best thing you can do at this point. Some people have gone to painting their catalytic converters orange with high temperature paint. Other people have engraved their names in their catalytic converters. That's great if it's some place where the converter is going where they ask questions, but most unscrupulous salvage dealers will take a catalytic converter that's orange and has your name on it, and they don't really care. They're just taking it for they're probably not giving the person what it's worth, and they're selling it as salvage to get the rare metals out of it. So something that eventually will probably go away. But until there's more, I think, more pressure put on the salvage dealers, it's something we're faced with. And again, park in well-lit areas, lock your car, regular old-fashioned advice.
Gotcha. Yeah, thanks. I'm gonna store that in my memory and make sure that I do those things to protect my vehicle. Well, thank you, John. I really appreciate you having this conversation with me. I hope it's helpful for some of the people who are watching this after the fact. And as always, we want to make sure that everybody, wears that seatbelt, stay safe, maintain your vehicle, because it will take you a lot of places.
And the best little bit of advice, read that owner's manual. Take the owner's manual out. It's not the most exciting reading in the world, but the people who built the car, wrote the owner's manual, they're the ones that are going to tell you what needs to be done and when it needs to be done. Follow that advice and you'll be in good shape.
Absolutely. Now, John, if anybody has a question about car maintenance or something else, how can they get a hold of you?
Easiest way to get a hold of me, go to AAA.com/car doctor. There's a little section in there to ask a question. And typically I get back to everybody within 24 hours. Everybody who emails me gets a response.
That's awesome. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much.
All right. Take care. Be safe.